Hey, Charlie, my brother-in-law, you're here, in my shop. That's right, I sure am. So you have a project for me? Yes, Josh, I do. You know that movie, Beauty and the Beast? Sure do. Love that movie. Well, I'm directing a play based on that. Oh, a play. Like a movie, but live. You got it. Anyway, I might need your help with it. Wait, why are we conversing like this? Is this really how the conversation went? What do you mean? Well, did we actually discuss things this way? Or am I remembering it and presenting it in a way that resembles the same format as that really popular and hilarious internet skit where the guy reviews and comments on movies and TV shows? Unclear. Am I just doing a ripoff? Well, they say that ripoffs are the sincerest form of flattery. That is a thing that they say. Plus, ripoffs are tight. They sure are, so let's just go with it. Sounds good. Anyway, is this play based on the classic cartoon or the soulless cash grab live-action remake? No, the cartoon. Whew, you scared me there for a second. I bet I did. Anyway, the play. It's a lot of work. There's musical numbers and choreography, wardrobe, set design, not to mention all the fundraisers to help pay for the supplies. Wow, that does sound like a lot of work. Wouldn't it be easier to just, screen the movie? Well, we want to do a play based on the movie, because we like work. Fair enough. I'm going to need you to go ahead and get all the way off my back about this. Sure, let me get off of that thing. Perfect. So what I need you to do is, the wardrobe. I don't know, Charlie. That sounds like quite the commitment. And I don't even know how to sew. No, you could make it out of wood. The whole wardrobe made out of wood? Very weird. No, just the wardrobe. Just the one. Oh, you mean like a costume. Just one costume for the character of the wardrobe. Yeah. I feel like some alternative wording would have cleared up the confusion there. Whoopsie. So I thought maybe since all the other costumes that I'm getting look like cartoon characters, that maybe this could too? Doesn't sound too difficult. And maybe I could have it on wheels, and maybe have the doors open and close. And maybe have a drawer that, opens and closes like a puppet. Wow. And maybe I can make the inside into a magical portal to the land of Narnia. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that last part does sound a bit unrealistic. I don't know, we really just need a costume that looks accurate. Don't you think those extras might be a little too difficult? Actually, they'll be super easy. Actually, they'll be really simple, hardly an issue. Well, how are you going to do it? So, obviously this week I'm going to be just joshing around making a wardrobe costume for a Beauty and the Beast play. When I was asked to make this costume, I was more than happy to help, though admittedly very reluctant. You see, I've never made a costume before, let alone one that is a functional facade of a giant cartoon wardrobe. So, I was a little bit nervous. But when I broke down the design ideas, I knew that it would be doable. The first thing to do is to draw out all the details of the front panel. Now, typically what a smart person would do is print out a giant template and go off of that. But I decided to do it all freehand, because that's what I always do. I figured out all of my measurements and dimensions and scaled them according to the original cartoon design. And as you can see, started cutting it out. The front panel is made from a 3/4 inch sanded plywood, while the side structures and braces are all made from a 1/2 inch plywood. I initially used my circular saw to cut out a giant tombstone shape, which then I can use the jaw horse to hold it into place while I cut out all of the curves with my jigsaw. The jaw horse does a good job of holding the piece steady, but the entire works was dancing and vibrating around like crazy. However, I'm sure that this is mostly due to the chuck being kind of broken on this jigsaw. Whenever possible for all the straight cuts, I use my circular saw instead. While cutting the front doors out, I used extra caution to keep the cuts as straight and neat as possible. Next, I moved on to cutting up the sheet of 1/2 inch plywood for the structure. Just a special note here, I initially cut this sheet just in half, because I had planned on keeping the side pieces 24 inches deep, just to add extra room and stability. However, once I started to assemble the pieces, I quickly realized that it was going to be way too deep. So even though I didn't film it, I ended up cutting off about 4 inches from the depth of either side. Which wasn't really a big deal because I ended up using those pieces as braces. In fact, overall for this entire project, I had very little waste. Once that I had both of the bottom side panels cut, I started to assemble it from the ground up using this weld bond glue and brad nails. By the way, prior to the start of this project, I had never used weld bond before. However, I probably am going to use a lot of that stuff in the future because it worked really, really well. In fact, even though weld bond isn't a sponsor of mine, I highly recommend this glue. Anyway, I cut the next two side panels down to size and attached them one at a time into place. By the way, another side note here, to hold these giant panels in place, I'm using my brand new 2-foot clamps. My wife actually got these for me for Valentine's Day because she's awesome and she gets me. Anywho, you probably also noticed that I put some braces in place. That's just to add some extra strength to the connection between these panels and the bottom ones. Next, I cut out the two top shoulder panels and attached them into place as well. I haven't really mentioned it yet, but some of these angles were a little bit tricky to figure out. I didn't want the miter cuts to get too complex, so as much as I could, I tried to keep the edges straight. So some of these pieces did take a little bit of trial and error. One thing that you may also notice is that these two top pieces are not as deep as the others. And this is by design. I didn't want the face to be too far back on the body. I had a bit of trouble with some of the footage during filming, so you didn't get to see every little bit, like the installation of these casters. I apologize for that, but you really didn't miss too much. All that these little caster braces are little triangles made from 3/4 inch plywood that I attached into place using glue, brad nails, and screws. And then also those back braces that I added just for extra stability and strength. Next, I started to cut out the inner front panel that will act as the face of the drawers. I tried clamping it into place so that I could figure out all the angles for cuts, but then I figured, why don't I just put it out on the ground and put a door on top of it and use that? So I did. I cut out the panel so that each edge would be 1/2 inch wider than the door. I also cut and installed some scrap plywood to act as spacers so that this panel would be inset from the inside of the door about 1/2 inch. Once this panel was mounted, I used my circular saw to cut out a sub-panel that would act as the face of 2 drawers. Also, you may have noticed that when I initially started cutting this panel, I didn't have any tape in place. I quickly changed my mind and used some blue painter's tape to avoid any more chip out on the face. I used a scrap piece of plywood as a vertical support brace, and once again attached it into place using glue and brad nails. For the quote-unquote animated puppetry function of the drawers, I had to mount 2 braces through which the handle could slide. I cut both of these pieces down to size and installed them in place. For the correct placement of the handle, I found the center of the front brace and then drilled the hole. I then repeated the same process for the back brace as well. I found the correct handle position on the back of the drawer panel, drilled a shallow hole to countersink the tip of the handle, drilled another hole in a small piece to act as a reinforcement pad, cut the handle from an old broomstick and cut a little notch in there to act as a channel for the glue to escape, and then attached the handle into place. Then I slid the whole drawer assembly into place as well. By the way, I do realize that it's not an actual drawer, it's just the facade to give the illusion of a drawer. But anywho, now I'm installing the assembly for the clothes hanger bar, before switching to my favorite part of any project, sanding. I'm only being partially sarcastic here, because I actually enjoy using my brand new sander that I got off of Amazon. I bought this thing a few weeks ago and I can't say enough how much I actually like it. I was a bit hesitant to buy it at first because it's not a big brand name, but this thing works very, very well. I'll leave a link to it in the description. Now, on to painting. I chose a satin finish for this paint because I didn't want to have too much light glare on stage. Since I'm trying to get this thing to look as close to the cartoon version as possible, I chose the paint colors to reflect that. Main body is this heirloom white, and the doors are this green apple. All in all, I had to do 3 coats of paint over the entire surface because it just kept soaking into the wood. For all of the darker areas, such as the base here and the inside of the closet itself, I used this flat black. And for the little flower jewel thing at the top, I used this satin jade. Fun fact, this is actually leftover paint from the antique trident that I made over a year ago for my buddy Nick. What I'm doing here is very carefully drawing some lines to separate the drawers, or at least to give the appearance of that. Upon close inspection, you'd notice that these are just lines, but from a distance it's pretty convincing. Here's another part that I had issues with while filming. Well, that's only half true. I didn't really film all of this part because it took forever for me to figure out how to get these hinges mounted properly. But I'll speak to that more in just a bit. The next thing I want to do is talk about these drawer handles. Since these things are supposed to look cartoon-like, I pretty much just did a freehand outline and then filled in all of the areas with this metallic gold model paint. There are going to be 5 handles on this inner drawer face, and 2 larger ones in the bottom front. Now back to those hinges for a moment. I attempted to film the entire process of me trying to figure out how to mount the hinges, but the footage ended up being unusable, mainly due to the fact that I just couldn't figure out how to put these things on correctly. Typically hinges have a small clearance when they're closed. Unfortunately, that's not the case with these ones, and that's because these doors ended up being so heavy. I had to use larger, longer, bulkier screws to fasten them into place, just to make sure that these doors wouldn't fall off. So it took a bit of trial and error, resulting in me having to remove material from the areas where the hinges were installed on the doors. I'll admit the results definitely weren't perfect, but it worked out okay. One thing I really wasn't crazy about was having to use these ropes to support the doors. Again, I tried a few different things, but this is the best solution that I could come up with. The last thing I did was add some black outlines to all the gold areas, and then this thing was done.
Ooh, hello! Oh, we've got to get you ready for dinner. Let's see what I've got in my drawers. Ha-ha! Bound to be something in there for you.
I sincerely apologize for what you just saw there. This is simply the result of a man working on this wardrobe for 3 days straight, while sick, and being exposed to fumes from about 12 cans of spray paint. And on top of that, I'm just an inherently weird guy, so that's what you get. But let's take a closer look at some of the details on this wardrobe. On the faceplate here, you got these little curly cues, this golden headband, and a little crown piece at the top. Here's that flippin' rope that I told you about. I'll show you more on it in a second. I'm pretty happy with how the handles all turned out. I tossed around several different design ideas, but I'm satisfied with these results. For the back lining of this inner clothes hanging area, I just used a piece of landscaping fabric. It's nothing too fancy, but it'll do the trick. I'll spin it around here for a closer look at the back. For the face hole, I used sill foam to make it a little bit more comfortable. For the door mechanics, these 2 cords are resting inside a series of eye hooks. To close the doors, you simply pull on the cords, loop it up under this hook at the bottom, and secure it in place on this screw head. And to open them, you just reverse the process. It's not the most elegant solution, but it works. For the drawer handle, I carved out a channel on the top, and then glued a dowel pin into place to act as a guide and a stop for the handle, which helps to ensure that the drawer won't become misplaced. The casters all work pretty well, though I did add some sandbag weights to the back wheels just to add some extra stability since this thing is kind of front heavy. Also, to help with steering control, I added handles to both of the inner sides. In conclusion, I'm very pleased with how the wardrobe looks, though my biggest complaint is the mechanics of the doors, more specifically the cosmetic aspect of them. But be sure to let me know what you think in the comments below. Well, that's it for this one. Overall, I have to say I'm pretty happy with how this wardrobe turned out. I enjoyed working on the majority of this project, but there were a few things that drove me insane. Like, I don't understand how to install hinges apparently. But it did give me some practice on that. And it was fun to figure out some of the mechanical functions of this thing. While there are certainly things that I would do differently now, like I said, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I think it'll serve the purpose pretty well, and hopefully it doesn't fall apart on stage. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to like and subscribe, and, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, please share it with someone. Because sharing is caring, and if you're sharing this video, then you're caring for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.